What's up, friends? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Dave from Chase the Summit, and this is the brand new Garmin Forerunner 970. I've been wearing this watch for about a week, a little over a week now, and I've learned a lot about it, so that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, keep in mind, this is not a super in-depth review since I've only had it for a little over a week. That'll come down the road. What this is sort of like an initial review, kind of in between an in-depth review and initial review. I have a lot to say about this thing, so let's get into it. Before we talk about the new Garmin Forerunner 970, I want to jump back in time to the Garmin Forerunner 965. That's the watch I have here, and this is a watch that I wore for a very long time. In fact, at the time when this watch was announced, it pretty much checked all of the boxes for me and was sort of like my favorite Garmin watch that existed at that time. There was a lot to love about the 965, the form factor, the battery life, the features, the specs. Now, jumping back to the Forerunner 970, this watch is sort of the evolution of the 965. It pretty much carries the torch of what the 965 was, but adds a few nice features to have, even though it did get one downgrade that we'll talk about later in this video. So today we're going to talk about the new Forerunner 970, all of the new features and specs, how they've worked so far in my experience so far, what the new metrics mean, talk about my experience with battery life so far, and of course we'll look at things like GPS and heart rate accuracy, even though that's not really a surprise. But before we get into all of that, we need to talk about the price and the options available for the new Forerunner 970. So at the time of launch, this watch comes in at a whopping $750 US. Now that is the most expensive Forerunner to ever exist. And that price is gonna come up a lot in this video because it's starting to close the gap between what the Garmin Fenix 8 is and what the Forerunner line is. And these two watches have a lot in common, even their price now, which makes things a lot more confusing. On top of the price, at the time of launch, there are 3 colors available for the Forerunner 970. I actually have 2 of these watches. I've got the black one here that I've been wearing, but I also have the white version that has a green accent, and that's actually what my wife has been wearing. Now let's take a closer look at the hardware. By no surprise, the new Forerunner 970 shares a lot in common with the previous Forerunner 965. That's what's on the left here. And from a distance, you really can't tell these two watches apart. You do get the included black band here. This band actually does have some translucent material on the inside, which does look kind of cool. But unfortunately, they still don't include a quick fit band with the Forerunner 970. If you take a look at the back of the watch here, you can see that this is a standard band. It doesn't have the quick release mechanism at the top here. So that's what I did. I took off the standard band and replaced it with a quick fit band. These are available from Amazon or direct from Garmin, pretty affordable. And as always, I chose this sort of neon yellow lime green color. But I think aesthetically with this neon lime green band, along with the accent on the side of the watch here, this is actually a pretty good combo and looks pretty cool in my opinion. Now, of course, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so it's really gonna be up to you whether or not you like the colors available. And they all do have this like accent piece on the side here, but I think it's a cool looking watch. The Forerunner 970 comes in at 47 millimeters in diameter, and it's about 13 millimeters thick, and again, it's nearly identical to the Forerunner 965 here. It's all pretty much the same, even though the 970 is like a couple of grams heavier. That's not something you really notice. But if we do compare the new Forerunner 970 to the Fenix 8 AMOLED here, you can see their footprints are nearly identical. Both watches are a 47 millimeter form factor, and they're almost the same thickness, though the Fenix 8 is a bit thicker. But what I can say, even though they're similar in size, when you have these watches on your wrist, the 970, just like the 965, feels lower profile, much lighter. It's much less obtrusive. It's much less of a noticeable thing on your wrist. Another thing to mention about the size and weight of this watch is that my wife, like I said, has also been wearing the Forerunner 970, and obviously she has much smaller wrists than me. She does find this watch to be a little bit big for her wrist, so it's really going to come down to your personal preference and what size of a watch you can handle. Another big upgrade that has come to the Forerunner 970 on the right here is that this watch now has a titanium bezel and a sapphire crystal lens over the display. That sapphire crystal is the same material that they use on the Fenix 8 line, and it's incredibly scratch resistant. I've used sapphire watches for a very long time, and I personally have never managed to scratch one. I know there's a lot of you out there who have, but what I can say is sapphire is my preferred lens choice. Jumping to the back of the watch here on the Forerunner 970, you can see that it now has the Gen 5 heart rate sensor that a lot of other Garmin watches have had for a while now. And if we compare that to the 965 here, this watch has the Gen 4 heart rate sensor. Now on the Gen 5 heart rate sensor, you can see there's a visible change on how many light diodes there are and photo sites and all of that. So it is a little bit more accurate in some situations. Now keep in mind, I'm one person, I'm a sample of one, and in my experience, these heart rate sensors perform pretty well for me. There will be other reviewers out there that say this is a bad sensor and it might be for them, but you have to keep in mind there are variables like your skin color, your body fat percentage, your hair density, all that stuff does add up to change the accuracy of these heart rate sensors. But for me, so far, they've treated me pretty well. But on top of being slightly more accurate in some situations, the Gen 5 heart rate sensor also gets ECG or electrocardiogram features. It gets skin temperature detection, and those are features that are completely missing from the 965. So that's good to have here. Jumping to the side of the watch here, we've got the buttons. And it's funny how many people ask about the button quality. Like, what's the click feel like compared to other watches? What I can say is they pretty much feel the same as compared to the Forerunner 965. The click is, it's not like mushy, there is a feeling of a click, but it's not as good as something like the Garmin Fenix 8 here that has this really distinct press to it. It feels a little bit more durable. And finally, another huge change to the hardware on the Garmin Forerunner 970 is the inclusion of the LED flashlight. Now, this is a physical flashlight. We're not using the screen as a flashlight here. It's actually built into the case of the watch. And this is something that is incredibly useful and something I use basically on an everyday basis when I'm wearing the Fenix 8 here. So it's really nice to have on the Forerunner 970. The funny thing about this flashlight is I rarely ever use it for like trail running or hiking or running in the dark or something like that. I really only use the flashlight for mundane tasks, like finding my keys when I drop them, or navigating a dark bedroom, trying to find the bathroom, or finding my kids' toys under the couch, that sort of situation. Until you have this, just don't judge it. It's a really useful feature. Next up, let's talk about the display. I've already mentioned this in previous videos, but let's do it again. The new Forerunner 970 on the right here includes a 1.4-inch AMOLED touch-enabled display. And the size and resolution of that display is identical between the 965, the Fenix 8 AMOLED at the 47mm form factor, and the 970. However, Garmin has made a major upgrade to the brightness of this display. It is incredibly bright. Garmin didn't put a nit spec to it, but they say that it's roughly twice as bright as something like the Garmin Fenix 8 or Forerunner 965 here. And I'd say they're accurate. I've taken this watch out on a number of different runs, and even in blaring direct sunlight at the wrong angle when you're kind of have the sun coming over your shoulder and you're trying to read the display on the Forerunner 970 is superior to any other Garmin watch that's ever existed. It is the best AMOLED display that Garmin has ever made. Now, that's not to say the Fenix 8 and the 965 have bad displays. In fact, they still have really good displays, and I wouldn't complain about them until I compare it side by side with the 970 here, because the 970 really does elevate the brightness in those super bright situations that in some situations on the Fenix 8 make it hard to see, where you're sort of like angling your wrist a little bit. The 970 does none of that. It's so bright, it cuts right through it. Moving right along to the user interface. As you can see here, if I scroll down, the user interface looks very familiar. It looks a lot like the Garmin Forerunner 965 from the previous generation, but it's sort of a hybrid mixed in with the Fenix 8 as well. If I go through the menus here, you can see that the Fenix 8 looks very similar, though it just doesn't get all the gradients and colors of the Forerunner. But generally, the user interface looks very similar to previous models, where you've got these widget glances you can scroll through to see all of your metrics for a given day. There is one interesting anomaly with the 970 and its user interface that I hope Garmin can fix via a firmware update, and it's that there is one situation where it does lag. So you can see here, if I scroll through these widgets, there's really no lag at all. It's pretty responsive. But watch as I scroll past the new running tolerance widget. If I scroll, see there, it's completely locked up, and it does this for a couple of seconds. and now it's finally unlocked. And once I scroll past it, it's almost like the watch caches the information from the running tolerance widget, and now I can scroll freely. But if I go back to my watch face and then try to scroll down again, you'll see it does the exact same thing. To be fair though, that is the only situation where it lags. Every other situation, you can scroll through all of your information pretty freely. It's not like Apple Watch snappiness, but it is very snappy for a Garmin. Another big upgrade on the Forerunner 970 is the inclusion of a speaker and microphone. And this is pretty much the same setup that the Garmin Fenix 8 got as well. What this means is that you can hold the top right button and you could say commands like, "What's the weather today?" And I've got all my information today. It's going to be pretty warm. I can scroll down and get my hourly forecast and my daily forecast for the upcoming days. But with that voice command, I can do all kinds of things. I can start a run, I can actually launch the flashlight, and I can start timers and things like that. And the cool thing about those voice commands is that they're entirely offline. So I don't need an internet connection. I don't even need my phone near me for that to work. On the other hand, if I did want to interact with my phone, there's another option for that. So we have voice commands here. These are the offline voice commands internal to the watch. If I scroll down, there's also phone assistant, and this will interact with whatever assistant you have on your phone. In my case, I have an iPhone paired to it. So if I tap on that, it'll launch Siri and I'm able to send messages, check the weather, play some music, whatever. That will be driven through the phone's connection. So that's the microphone on the Forerunner 970. But what about the speaker? That's where things get kind of interesting. So when the Garmin Fenix 8 launched with the speaker and microphone, a lot of people complained about the volume of the speaker, including myself. It's just not a very loud speaker. So here I have both watches loaded up with my latest podcast from Spotify. Go check out my podcast if you haven't done that yet. I'm gonna play both back to back, first the Fenix 8, then the 970, and you can make your own judgment on just how loud they are. Now I'm just gonna leave them on the desk here and let my microphone pick them up, so let's do that now. First, the Fenix 8.
Okay, we are back. Welcome back to another episode of Distance Junkie, the official Chase the Summit podcast.
Now the 970.
Okay, we are back. Welcome back to another episode of Distance Junkie, the official Chase the Summit podcast.
Fenix 8.
You'll find like 70 episodes of this. I've been doing this for a while.
970.
Podcast, you'll find like 70 episodes of this. I've been doing this for a while.
So yeah, the Garmin Forerunner 970 is way louder when it comes to the speaker, and that is particularly useful when you are taking a phone call on your watch. Okay, with the speaker and microphone out of the way, let's dive into some of the new features and metrics on the Forerunner 970. And the first one I want to talk about, which I've already mentioned, is that new running tolerance widget. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what this metric actually means, but from what I understand, the big number is the acute impact load mileage. So impact load is sort of a weighted metric that tries to give you an idea of your compounded mileage based on previous activities. So it won't be your actual weekly mileage, but a value to determine the estimated load that the mileage you did that week had on your body. For example, if you run a lot of hills or something like that, or you're fatigued, your impact load mileage, the purple number here, will be significantly higher than your actual mileage. However, below that, you're gonna notice another little blurb where it says tolerance 35 miles per week, actual 7 days, 26.4 miles. So what that means is my running tolerance is 35 miles per week, and my actual mileage this week is 26.4. And this running tolerance metric is actually kind of interesting. It's trying to reflect how many weekly miles the watch thinks you can handle before you enter that phase of overtraining or risk of injury. Now, if I scroll down on this page, it also gives you this graph, which again is kind of interesting. The graph actually shows an orange line that represents your tolerance, which can sort of average up or down. Below that, you've got the purple graph, which is your impact load mileage, and then the white line represents your actual mileage. And when it comes to running tolerance, this metric is entirely driven from the watch itself with no extra accessories required. However, there is another metric, if I scroll down here, called running economy that does require an additional sensor. This here is the Garmin HRM 600 heart rate strap, and this heart rate strap is required if you want to collect this data for your running economy metric. And the reason why you need that additional sensor, Garmin says, is because there's some gyroscopes and accelerometers and stuff in that band that can detect your step speed loss. And your step speed loss is basically the braking force you have every time your foot hits the ground, and that calculation is rolled into the algorithm to come up with your running economy. A couple of things to know about running economy. This metric is only generated after about 5 to 7 runs. It won't be working right out of the box. It requires a steady state workout. It can't be like a workout where you're doing intervals, getting your heart rate super high and then dropping it down and going back up and down. It wants a steady state standard workout like zone 2, zone 3, where you're not really killing yourself and you are on flat terrain. Another thing about running economy is that it does not work indoors. If you have a treadmill or you're on an indoor track or something like that, even with the HRM 600 heart rate sensor, you will not get this metric. So as you can see here, the running economy metric has me at 198. I don't actually know the scale here. And that tells me that I am quote unquote well-trained. But this is one of these metrics where I'm like, what is the value of this metric? Is it really to see how you're improving or not improving? Because realistically, your running economy and form doesn't change all that much over time. But I guess I'll have to test this long-term and see if there's any value here. For now, it's just one of those things in the background that's kind of interesting. The next new feature I want to talk about on the 970 here is called Projected Race Predictor. And this race predictor is different than what we saw on previous models like the 965 here, which did have a race predictor, but it was based on your current fitness level. On the new 970 here, it has something called Projected Race Predictor, where if I dive into my race calendar and open an event, it'll actually tell me what my estimated completion time will be for that particular event out in the future. So if I keep it up and keep doing what I'm doing now for the next few weeks until this next race, potentially I could finish it in 4 hours and 22 minutes. There's a couple of things to note about this new projected race predictor. First of all, it doesn't work on anything longer than a 50K race. So you can see here, I've got the Vermont 100-mile endurance race here. And if I scroll down, I do not get a projection for this race because it's too long and they don't project out that far. I'm not sure why. Another thing to note about this feature is that for this to work, you actually have to add the race to your calendar. And once you do that, you will see it appear. And the third thing to note about this is it seems wildly inaccurate. So as you can see here, this is the Tark Summer Classic 50K, which is a 32-mile-ish race here locally. And last time I ran it, I was in the best shape of my life. It took me around 5 hours to complete. Pretty much knowing me now and my fitness level currently, I'm pretty sure it would take me closer to 6 hours to complete. I guess I could be wrong until I actually run it, but Garmin's saying that I could run it in 4 hours and 22 minutes or 4 hours and 35 minutes, which does seem very aggressive. My theory behind the inaccuracy here is because that's a somewhat hilly race. There's a lot of hills. It's a trail run, and I don't think Garmin is taking those hills into account. Now, when it comes to activity profiles and customizations on the Garmin Forerunner 970, there's an absolute ton to choose from. If I dive into the activities menu here, I've got all the standards like run, track run, bike, swim, etc. We've also got triathlon and duathlon mode. We've also got team sports for basketball, football, baseball, and a lot more. There's water sports for stand-up paddleboarding, kayaking, rowing, snorkeling, and more. There's winter sports for skiing, snowboarding, and a lot more. You get the idea here. If you're doing an activity not on the list here, I would be surprised. They pretty much cover all of the bases. And within each activity, you can also add up to 8 data fields per page. You can see here, I just started a trail run. I've only got 4 data fields, but if I want more information, I can add them. I can swap out any of this data as I please. It's fully customizable. Moving right along to mapping and navigation. As you can see here, the Garmin Forerunner 970 does feature full offline maps and navigation, just like on the Garmin Fenix 8 or 965 here. However, there has been a subtle tweak to the mapping system on the 970, and this is something I was hoping for a very long time. In the past, the Forerunner series always had slight differences to their mapping features compared to the Fenix series, which just drove me crazy. And that's been solved on the Forerunner 970. They've actually added the exact same mapping system that you find on the Fenix 8, which does include things like double tap to zoom. You can pan around with your finger. You can tap a point in space and get a little description on what you're clicking on there. Another thing you'll notice about the maps, if you can see it on my camera here, because the screen is just so bright, there's also shaded relief in the contours. So if there's a hill, you can actually see it with the shading of the map. And it should go without saying that you can also create and customize courses in Garmin Connect and Garmin Trails and sync them over to your watch. You can pull in GPX files and sync them to your watch, or you can simply create them on the fly and do it in real time. With mapping out of the way, let's dive into GPS modes and accuracy because we're gonna get this done pretty quick. The Forerunner 970 has the exact same GPS system, multi-band GNSS system as the Fenix 8, the 965, and a lot of other Garmin watches. So it should go without surprise that the Forerunner 970 also does a pretty good job. Now I have done some comparisons just for the sake of science, and from what I can tell so far, it's nearly identical to the Forerunner 965 in just about every situation, comparing them side by side. So I'm not gonna dive too deep on this. They both have multi-band GNSS, they both have SatIQ with auto select technology, and they both have pretty good GPS accuracy in my testing so far. And the final topic I wanna bring up in this video is one of great debate with the Forerunner 970, and that is battery life. As mentioned in my previous videos about this watch, the battery life on the Forerunner 970 has been reduced as compared to the previous model in the 965. And that's due to things like the brighter display, the built-in flashlight, the speaker, the mic. That all took up component space inside the watch, so they couldn't put as big of a battery in there, and there's more things to operate. So on Garmin's own spec sheet, they say you'll get about 15 days of use with the Forerunner 970 in smartwatch mode. In GPS only mode, you'll get about 26 hours of use. And in default SatIQ mode, which auto selects between multi-band and single band, you can get up to 23 hours of use. So in my testing so far, I think I'd comfortably get between 5 to 9 days of use with the Forerunner 970 in my lifestyle. That's going on runs just about every day, between 30 and 90 minutes long on most days. Could be longer on other days and shorter on others, and that's why I say between 5 and 9 days, because there's a lot of variables. And when it comes to Garmin's claims of 15 days in smartwatch mode, I think you could get that. That's only if you don't do any GPS activities. And at that point, why are you buying a $750 watch? So that's day-to-day life in smartwatch mode, 5 to 9 days. Generally, that's my guess so far. But what about in a GPS activity? That's where things get kind of interesting. So again, I've done a whole bunch of testing on this during my long runs, trying to calculate how much battery I'm losing on each run. And from what I'm seeing so far, it's between 4 to 5% per hour. So that's roughly 20 to 21 hours of total battery life in a GPS activity with default settings. That part's important. However, again, if you did need longer than 20 to 21 hours of use, that's where you could tweak some settings. If you go into GPS only mode, turn down your brightness, turn down your screen timeout setting, all of those things have a big impact on battery life. And I have a whole video about this from the Forerunner 965, where I actually ran a 100-mile ultra marathon with this watch, and I still had like 48% of battery left because I changed a bunch of these settings. So I'm planning to do the same thing with the 970, put it through its paces, run an ultra with it, and try to see exactly how long I can milk the battery for with certain settings. Okay, that brings us to the end of this video where I want to talk final thoughts and conclusions with the Forerunner 970 and what I think about it so far. The Garmin Forerunner 970 sort of checks all the boxes for me. It really took the Forerunner 965 and added just about every wish list item I had to this watch. We got the sapphire lens, we got the built-in flashlight, we got the new metrics, we got a lot more stuff with the Forerunner 970. With that said, there are two major downsides to this watch. First, as I just mentioned, the battery life. While it's likely fine for 99% of users out there who are training for marathon distances or even something like an Ironman triathlon, 23 hours in default settings in a GPS activity is a bit disappointing and somewhat limiting for those who pursue longer activities like ultra marathons. And even if you're not doing ultra marathons, it's also slightly annoying that this watch will need to be charged more frequently as compared to the previous model. The other major downside to this watch is something we need to discuss, and that is the price. At $750 US, this watch is no longer a cheaper alternative to something like the Fenix 8 here. That $750 price point is creeping closer and closer to the Fenix 8, which can be found on sale for nearly the same price. On the other hand, if I jump back in time to the Forerunner 965, and I asked myself, would I pay $150 more than the retail price of the 965 for a sapphire display, speaker and microphone, and a flashlight? I might. I don't know. I might. It's really going to boil down to you and what you think of the price and the features and whether or not it's worth it to you. If you do ignore the price and simply look at what the Forerunner 970 is, it's an awesome watch. And if it had slightly longer battery life, this thing would be damn near perfect for me. But the battery life. But that's just my opinion, and I'm just some guy on YouTube. And now's the point of the video. I want to hear from you in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of the Forerunner 970. Did you run out and buy one? Are you going to hold off and wait for the next model? Are you going to pick up a 965 on sale or a Fenix 8 on sale? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, after you do that, make sure to go down and give me that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel down below so you don't miss more videos from me in the future. There will be lots of follow-up content about the 970, including a long-term review down the road. And after you're done subscribing, make sure to check out the description down below where you can head over to my friends at trackbetter.com and pick up your very own Forerunner 970 with free 2-day shipping and a really great return policy. After you do that, also check out all of my other social media accounts down there. My Threads, my Instagram, my Strava, and my merch store where you can pick up a sweet hat like that. Chase the Summit. What do you think? Pretty good, right? And that's all I've got for this one. I thought this would be quick, but I've been talking for a while. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.